I was escorted out of my own boardroom with a catered lunch still steaming on the mahogany table, and my name misspelled on the farewell slide. My name is Daniel Royce. I'm 56 years old, and until about 3 hours ago, I was the head of human resources at Argento Systems, a mid-market tech firm I helped grow from 40 people in a shared WeWork to nearly 1,200 employees across 5 countries. For 22 years, I negotiated every merger, brokered every labor dispute, designed the culture, built the playbooks, and watched that logo go from napkin sketch to IPO banner. And then a smug 29-year-old with a diamond earring and a personal brand deck called me misaligned. It started at 9:14 a.m. My assistant, Clarissa, buzzed in with a shaky voice. "Dan, Zane's asking for you in the third-floor conference room, the one with the big screen." That alone told me everything. We never used that room unless something needed to look official or look like it wasn't going to end well. When I walked in, Zane was already seated. No handshake, just a flat smile, the kind that looks rehearsed. He was flanked by Karen from legal and a woman I didn't recognize, probably from PR. There was a thick folder in front of them. No one offered me coffee, I didn't sit. He dove right in. "Dan, I want to thank you for your years of service. Decades, actually. What you've built here, it's foundational. But as we move into a new era of innovation-first workplace strategy, we're making some realignments in leadership." He didn't blink when he said it. "You're not aligned with today's workplace culture, and that's okay. It's natural." Natural. Karen slid the folder toward me. The first page was a summary of the severance package. Generous, yes, but bound tight with a thick non-disclosure clause and a clause that essentially gagged me from consulting in the industry for 2 years. I flipped through it in silence, listening to the blood rush in my ears. My voice, when I finally spoke, came out calm. I surprised myself. "And who's replacing me?" Zane grinned. "Sierra Maxwell. She's been doing some really exciting things on TikTok around culture mapping. Full-stack digital HR strategist. Gen Z innovator." Sierra had been with the company for 11 months. Her biggest contribution so far was installing beanbags in the HR lobby and launching a Slack emoji for emotional alignment check-ins. She called herself a vibe architect. I called her untested. Zane clearly called her the future. I signed the papers. Not because I agreed, but because I knew I had no one left in that room who would speak up. The board had already approved it. Hell, they probably drafted the language. My inbox was disabled by 10:30. My keycard deactivated at 10:45. They gave me one final board meeting, scheduled for noon. I walked in, and they were already halfway through the agenda. My name came up on slide 14. The bullet read, "Dan Royce. Retirement, effective immediately." Zane clicked through without comment. Only Linda, our CFO, gave me a brief glance. It didn't hold. No cake, no stories, no mention of the 3 acquisitions I mediated, or the 0 lawsuits during my tenure. Just a digital shrug and a quick transition to Q2 forecasting, Gen Z acquisition strategy. I walked out. My office still smelled like the cedar diffuser Clarissa used to refill every Monday. I packed in silence. No one came by. Not even Clarissa. HR had already reassigned her to report directly to Sierra. I filled one small box, my leather planner, a framed photo of the founding team, back when we worked from a garage, and a thick binder labeled Culture Draft 9. It was a leadership manual I'd co-written with our original COO. We shelved it after the IPO in favor of glossy slide decks and disruption-first lingo. But I never threw out my copy. By 5 o'clock, I was the only one left on the floor. I took one last walk down the hallway, pausing at the glass wall that overlooked the courtyard we installed last year, back when we thought legacy meant something. On the way out, the front desk intern asked if I needed parking validated. I almost laughed. I shook my head, walked out the door, and let it close behind me for the last time. I didn't make a speech, I didn't throw a chair, I didn't even take the plaque with my name on it. I left quietly, but not empty. Because what they forgot, what they never really knew, is that culture doesn't live in beanbags and buzzwords. It lives in the way people trust each other when no one's watching, and I carried that out with me. Every word, every principle, every battle-won compromise in that manual, it came with me. And maybe they're right, maybe I'm not aligned with today's culture. But I know damn well I helped define the one that built this company, and what I carried out today might just build something better. The first week felt like retirement, the second felt like exile. I woke up on Monday and reached for a phone that no longer buzzed. I read the news, skimmed LinkedIn, and watched the office updates roll in from the outside looking in. They gave Sierra my old desk and turned the HR lounge into a wellness pod zone, whatever that meant. I made coffee, I watered the plants. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the spine of that leather binder. Friends called. Some texted things like, "You'll bounce back," or "Everything happens for a reason." Others just sent emojis, shrug faces, or awkward thumbs up. The ones I trusted most didn't say anything for a few days. When they finally did, their voices were loaded with caution, like I'd caught something contagious. Displacement, maybe. My son Matt came by on Thursday night. He's 27, smarter than I'll ever be, and just cynical enough to see through performative nonsense without getting jaded. We sat on the back porch, the dog asleep between us, the air heavy with pine and silence. "You should publish it," he said, nodding toward the binder I'd brought out with my whiskey. "Publish what?" I asked, like I didn't know. "The manual. The thing you spent a decade refining while they plastered the walls with inspirational quotes and called it culture." I shook my head. "Nobody wants old school leadership, Matt." He took a sip. "It's not old school if it works." I didn't argue, I just let it sit, like everything else. The next few days blurred. I tried to journal, nothing came. I opened job boards, scrolled for 5 minutes, and closed them again. I wasn't ready to be someone's strategic hire in a startup run by someone half my age with a crypto side hustle and a vision board. Then one night, around midnight, I pulled the binder off the shelf. The leather was cracked, but the pages were clean. I flipped past the title, Culture by Design, a framework for organizational integrity, and started reading, not scanning, reading. Slowly, page by page. It wasn't jargon, it wasn't fluff, it was real. A roadmap for building trust, not trend, for creating systems where people didn't have to brand themselves every time they spoke, where value wasn't defined by how loud your Slack profile was, where leadership was earned, not curated. I stayed up all night editing. By dawn, the red pen was out, sticky notes fluttered from half the chapters, and I was wide awake for the first time in weeks. I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt sharp. By Friday, I'd sent 3 texts. First to Michelle, our former learning and development lead, who was restructured 6 months ago after Zane said her feedback models were too empathy-centered. Then to John, who built our entire onboarding ecosystem before being replaced by a new talent UX flow from an agency that charged 6 figures for digital post-its. And finally to Arjun, our quiet, brilliant policy analyst who caught a legal gap in the intern program and was let go 3 weeks later for not being collaborative enough. We met Sunday afternoon at a local cafe, the kind without Wi-Fi, the kind where the coffee comes in ceramic cups and the tables still wobble. Michelle hugged me like we were at a funeral. Maybe we were. John wore the same confused half-smile he used to wear during budget meetings. Arjun just nodded, but his eyes said more than his words ever did. We didn't vent, we didn't whine, we got to work. I opened the binder and laid it on the table between us. They leaned in like I'd brought contraband. Maybe I had. "These aren't just old notes," I said. "It's a system, a real one. Built over 2 decades, with people who cared, not gimmicks, not culture theater." They read. Michelle flipped through the talent architecture section and whispered, "I forgot what real alignment looked like." Arjun traced a diagram I drew back in 2014 on stakeholder transparency and nodded. John tapped a page on ethical performance metrics and said, "If we'd implemented this 2 years ago, we wouldn't have lost half the mid-tier." We stayed for 4 hours. By the time we left, we had a name, Anchorline People Systems. The metaphor was obvious, not the flashy sail, not the deck chairs, the anchor, the thing that holds when everything else shifts. We weren't launching anything public, no posts, no press, just outreach to a few leaders we trusted, quiet companies with real problems and no time for culture cosplay. We'd give them a foundation. And if that foundation happened to make Zane's shallow, #heavy empire look like a house of cards, so be it. This wasn't revenge, it was a reckoning. And we were just getting started. Our first client wasn't glamorous. No rooftop lunches or neon mission statements painted on the walls. Just a 400-person SaaS company in Milwaukee called Rynex, bleeding talent faster than they could hire. Their CEO, Ellen Tran, didn't find us through a flashy campaign. She found us through Michelle's network and an old copy of my draft manual that someone had passed to her like contraband. Ellen opened our first call with, "We don't need yoga breaks or kombucha kegs. We need trust." That's when I knew we'd found the right match. Rynex had been through 3 reorgs in 18 months. Exit interviews used phrases like, "No one listens," "We're replaceable," and "Leadership is allergic to accountability." Ellen, to her credit, admitted it. "We scaled fast and got shallow," she told me. "Our culture's a filter we use in job posts, but no one here feels it." So we got to work. John rebuilt their onboarding process from the ground up, focusing on relational connection over information dumps. Arjun redesigned the feedback structure so that instead of anonymous forms that vanished into HR purgatory, team leads facilitated guided sessions every quarter with accountability trails. Michelle coached mid-level managers on how to actually lead, not just delegate. I worked with Ellen directly. 3 hours every Monday morning, no exceptions. We talked power, perception, and the cost of performative leadership. And it started to click. By week 4, Glassdoor reviews started shifting. Not overnight, but enough that I noticed. One review simply said, "It finally feels like someone's listening." Another read, "They stopped trying to vibe us and started trying to see us." That one hit. I hadn't planned to post anything. I never liked the spotlight. But something about that review made me sit down at my desk and write what became our first public message. I titled it, "Quiet Culture Repair, the Work Behind the Buzzwords." Just 600 words, no hashtags, no branding. I ended it with this line, "Real culture doesn't trend, it endures." I expected maybe a dozen likes. Instead, it hit 60,000 views in 2 days. 36 CEOs reached out by the end of the week. One message read, "If I send this to my COO, he'll think I wrote it myself. When can we talk?" Another one, shorter, sharper, said, "You're saying what we're all too scared to admit publicly." I didn't recognize the name on one of the emails until I opened his company's site. He ran Corton Edge Technologies, a direct competitor to Argento, Zane's former lunch and learn punching bag. The subject line was, "Finally, someone gets it." I didn't respond right away. I let it sit, just like I let everything Zane did wash past me now without reaction. But he was still out there, trying to stay viral. 3 days after my post, someone forwarded me a TikTok Zane had made. He stood on the Argento rooftop with a selfie stick, wind blowing his branded hoodie, saying, "Leadership's evolving. We're not here to manage people. We're here to co-create energy. Legacy models are fear-based. Our model, it's vibe-based. We don't onboard, we inspire board." His followers, mostly junior execs with thought leader in their bios, loved it. The comments were full of fire emojis and "this guy's the future." But I knew the other side. Because while Zane postured on rooftops, Argento's attrition rate had climbed to 38%. Their Glassdoor was hemorrhaging. Former employees weren't bitter, they were exhausted. Reviews now said things like, "Culture built on chaos," and "HR is a branding exercise, not a support system." Sierra had installed a vibe feedback tool that let people rate their emotional resonance on a daily basis. No one knew what it actually did. One review summed it up best. "We have a Slack channel for vibes, but no one to talk to when we're drowning." I never clapped back, never quoted Zane, never referenced him directly. I didn't need to. Data was doing the talking. Rhinex's turnover dropped 17% in the first quarter. Internal satisfaction scores jumped 22 points. Their engineering team hit their roadmap targets 2 months early because people weren't scared anymore. They were grounded, seen. Anchorline didn't go viral. We didn't post team selfies or just closed graphics. We just worked, quietly, intentionally. And word spread faster than any algorithm. I kept my mornings sacred. Coffee, handwritten notes, no screens. Every afternoon was for clients. Every night, I reread the manual. Not because I needed to revise it, but because every time I did, it reminded me why we built this in the first place. Not to win back the chair they took from me, but to build something that never needed one. And while Zane collected likes, I collected something else: trust. From CEOs, from managers, from employees tired of the noise, from people who didn't want to perform culture anymore. They wanted to live it, and I wasn't done yet. The request came through Michelle. She forwarded the email with just 3 words. "You seeing this?" At first I thought it was a mistake, a glitch in the spam filter, or maybe some weird automated invite. But no, there it was. A formal request from Argento Systems Strategy Team, inviting Anchorline People Systems to present at their upcoming leadership retreat. They wanted an outside expert to speak on sustainable culture architecture and organizational integrity. They didn't recognize the name. I said yes. The retreat was scheduled in the same off-site location we used during my last year at Argento, an old converted vineyard an hour outside the city. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd once hosted sessions there on legacy stewardship and quiet influence. Now I was walking in the front door as a ghost from their past with a binder full of the future. I wore a dark blazer, no tie, just clean lines and calm posture. I left the name tag blank. Let them guess. Inside the main hall, the air was all hushed voices and recycled jargon. I scanned the nameplates, familiar titles, rearranged. The boardroom table was longer now, sleeker. But the dynamics hadn't changed. Power still sat in the same chairs. And there he was, Zane, hunched over his phone, tapping rapidly. He looked up and froze when I entered, just for a second. Then he pasted on a smirk and whispered something to Sierra, who sat beside him, wearing a sweater that said, "Lead with vibes." No one said my name. I started the session like I would with any client. No theatrics, no fanfare. Today we're going to talk about culture scaffolding, how to support what you claim to value before it collapses under its own branding. I saw the flicker of confusion as I flipped to the first slide. The framework, my framework, was familiar to them. Too familiar. "Real culture isn't loud," I said. "It doesn't shout. It shows up when nobody's watching." I walked them through the diagnostic tiers: psychological safety, leadership transparency, consequence accountability. I used examples, not from Argento, of course, but from firms that had actually adopted the system. I showed metrics, timelines, turnaround stories. And then I pulled up the slide with the original 5 pillars. Even the title font hadn't changed. That's when one of the older board members, Jeff McMurray, leaned toward the woman next to him and whispered, just loud enough for the room to catch it. "Why does this sound familiar?" I paused. Then I smiled, steady and sharp. "Because you shelved the original version in 2013. I co-authored it. You said it was too slow, too idealistic. Said the market wanted something flashier." The room went quiet. Even Zane stopped smirking. I let the silence stretch. "And now," I continued, clicking to the next slide, "companies that implemented this model have seen a 22% retention improvement, a 40% drop in internal grievance filings, and, my favorite, no vibe surveys." A few chuckles, nervous ones. I didn't join them. I closed the session with one line. "You don't have a retention problem. You have a recognition problem, and culture doesn't scale unless people believe it belongs to them." No applause, just stillness. Afterward, as the board filtered out for lunch, Jeff approached me near the coffee cart. His expression was tight, tired, the kind of look people wear when the weight of regret catches up faster than expected. "We made a mistake," he said. I didn't nod. I didn't argue. "You didn't make a mistake," I said. "You made a choice." He sighed. "We'd like to explore a partnership. Maybe even acquire your framework outright. Fold it back in." I looked him straight in the eye. "You already did. You folded it in and buried it. I won't make the same mistake twice." He blinked. "You're walking away from a full circle moment." "No," I said. "I'm walking because it's full circle. Some things don't need to come back around." I walked out of the building I once called a second home. No badge, no ID, just my notes and a long exhale. On the ride back to the city, I didn't replay the meeting. I didn't second-guess the delivery. I didn't fantasize about what might have been if they'd listened 12 years ago. I thought about what we'd built since. Anchorline was working, not scaling fast, not trending, but working quietly, powerfully, unshakably. We didn't need their boardroom anymore. We were building our own. The mornings are quieter now. I wake before the sun, make coffee in a ceramic mug that fits just right in my hand, and opened the windows of my home office to the sound of waves. No alarms, no meeting pings, just the hush of tide and the slow stir of a life reclaimed. 6 months ago, I walked out of a boardroom that forgot my name. Now, I sit in a space of my own, light-filled, paper-strewn, with one frame page on the wall, the original cover of Culture by Design, the book we almost buried, the book that now sits on the desks of 3 Fortune 500 CEOs, bookmarked, highlighted, dog-eared, and real. Anchorline is thriving, not viral, not loud, just grounded. We've taken on 7 clients, all by referral. We don't advertise, we don't pitch, we listen, we guide, we build from the inside out. John and Michelle are now partners. Arjun leads diagnostics with surgical precision. We meet twice a week, virtually and sometimes in person, always with notebooks open. The same kind of notebooks we used to hide from product teams afraid of non-actionable ideas. And the manual? It's not a manual anymore, it's a movement. After the book launch, I did one podcast interview, just one. I said what needed saying and left the rest alone. The interviewer asked, "What would you say to the people who replaced you?" I smiled and said, "Nothing. They've heard enough voices. It's time they listen to silence." Zane never reached out. Not after the board meeting, not after the book, not even after the scandal broke. It came like a crack in glass, slow, then all at once. Turns out, Argento's polished DEI numbers were more fiction than fact. Interns being labeled contractors to sidestep reporting. Exit NDAs issued like candy. Layoffs disguised as culture realignments without legal review. A whistleblower from the operations team leaked internal docs to a journalist who actually read the fine print. The headline was brutal. The company of vibes, inside Argento's culture collapse. Zane's rooftop TikToks stopped. Sierra's last post was a digital detox announcement. The board issued a statement full of language I once helped them craft. Transparent, measured, empty. The fallout was swift. Zane was ousted, the word resigned stretched thin in the press release. No replacement announced, just restructuring. They never called me, never apologized. I didn't expect them to. That part of my life was over. These days I walk the beach near my house most afternoons. I don't bring my phone, just a pen and a small black journal. I watch the waves pull and return, a rhythm older than ambition, older than betrayal. I write down what matters, what I've learned, what I've let go. Last week a letter arrived. No return address, just my name in careful handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a folded card. "Dear Mr. Royce," it began. "You won't remember me. I was an intern in the HR department in 2016. You walked past my desk every morning and said, 'You're not invisible.' I thought it was just something nice. But then, you sat down during my second week and asked what I wanted to do. Not at Argento, but in life. No one had ever asked me that before. I left the company last year. The culture had changed. But what you said stuck. I'm now leading people operations at a nonprofit that actually sees its team. And I say those same words to every new hire. You showed me how to lead without a spotlight. Thank you." I read it twice, then set it gently on the desk. No frame, no Instagram photo. Just the simple act of letting it exist. Later that evening, I opened my journal. There's no ceremony to how I write. No title pages or outlines, just a date, a line, a truth. Today I wrote, "They took the chair, I took the foundation, I stood on it, and built something better." I closed the journal, stepped outside. The tide was coming in, the wind was steady. I breathed in deep and smiled, not from triumph, not from vindication, but from peace. Because they tried to erase me from a table I helped build, and instead of fighting for my seat, I built a better table.